A lot of times they'll miss the spoon like that. I think all they're seeing is just an image and a vibration running across the top of that grass.
County, New York, the splendor of the majestic Catskill Mountains, just 90 miles from New York City. One of the East Coast's best bass fisheries, the Hudson River. For the next 4 days, the best professional bass fishermen and their amateur partners will tackle the tidewaters of the Hudson, trying to catch the biggest daily creel of largemouth and smallmouth bass. For the most successful anglers in the Bassmaster New York Top 100 tournament, there's fame and fortune worth over $273,000. This is their story.
The Hudson River Valley, near Catskill, New York. The place where Washington Irving's legendary character, Rip Van Winkle, dozed off for over 20 years. Watching Jim Bitter, a legendary professional angler from Fruitland Park, Florida, will do the same thing. Put you to sleep. While others in the New York Top 100 dash about trying to run and gun to keep up with the Hudson's title changes, Big Jim's camped on a spot. Seeing Jim Bitter fish is about as exciting as watching grass grow. He's slow, he's methodical, very patient and confident. All the things a top-notch pro basser must do when conditions are tough and bass tight-lipped. What you Bassmasters at home will learn from the pros' experience on the Hudson River will boost your chances when the bite's slow. Stay with us and don't doze off. I'm Bob Cobb. The Bassmasters will be coming right back with tips and tactics you can use to catch more bass.
The Bassmaster New York Top 100. A big money event on the super-rich Bass Angler Sportsman Society's $4 million tournament trail. The place, the Hudson River. The launch point, the village of Catskill. The players, 109 top-ranked pro bass anglers paired with amateur partners. The pros fish for a $45,000 first-place prize. In their division, the amateurs compete for a $20,000 fully rigged Ranger bass boat, powered with an OMC 150 horsepower outboard motor. The total purse, over $273,000. The season, fall, late September. Normally a time when the largemouth bass move in big numbers from the Hudson, migrating into the larger creeks in preparation for winter. However, this has not been a normal routine pattern for this year, as Bassmaster Joe Law, a veteran Hudson River angler, explains.
The water temperature gets down in the 50s, 59, 60s, they start moving into the creeks. But yeah, as long as it stays warm, they'll stay right out in that river. You know. But if it gets cool, they start moving in. Once they start coming in, they just pile in there.
That pattern worked well last time the BASS tournament trail dropped anchor on the Hudson River in 1986. But as local guide Donald Naylor points out, the river and bass behavior are changing.
The river before was dingy. You couldn't see, luckily, if you could see down 2 feet. And now it's clear and the fish are moving back off these points. They're not hanging on the points in the dingy water like they used to. All the grass is growing up now and they can move off the points and hang on the grass beds instead of, that's the only thing I had before was no grass in the bays. They had to go onto the rocks when the tide went out or just lay in open water.
The tide, for sure it changes, and a major factor in tidewater bassin.
The best time to fish is either the last 3 hours of outgoing and the first 3 hours of incoming tide. The saying around here, when it gets to be high tide, it's time to eat your lunch. Fish just don't bite too well.
Explain how an angler addresses the tide. You local guys, what do?
Well, we kind of like the tide going out. It's starting to break out, and usually that's your best fishing. About an hour after it breaks out, then it seems to slow up.
Well, if it's an incoming tide, what you try to do is you try to run south and you keep following the tide up. I have a watch that tells me exactly what the tide is doing all the time, and I reference it off of Saugerties because that's where I'm basically home. And you just keep running with the tide. You always try to be on your best spots when the tide is best for you.
If the tide's not moving the best, there's no bait moving around, there's nothing for them to chase. I think as the tide comes up or goes down, it moves the bait fish around, and when the tide's slack, they can get into the grass and bury up and hide, basically.
Plus, at a high tide, the tide is slack, and these fish in the river, I find if you fish them like you would a trout stream, you fish the eddies, when the eddies create around the points, that the fish feed with the current.
Tidal water bassin, a tough challenge. It's going to be interesting to see how the New York Top 100 tournament pros develop fish-catching patterns. But right now, a tip of the hat to Ray Scott's Casting Kid of the Week.
Here's a good bassing buddy, Jesse Vollmer of Cortland, Minnesota. Jesse's made quite a splash in the flip, pitch, and casting program. This 10-year-old has reached the National Casting Kids Finals 3 straight years in a row. He's been a standout in the Northern Division 7 to 10-year-old age group. Jesse's been hooked on fishing ever since he caught a big sunfish as a 2-year-old. He plays football, basketball, and baseball, but fishing's his main game. A big Bassmaster salute for Jesse Vollmer of Cortland, Minnesota, our Bassmaster Casting Kid of the Week.
The Bassmaster New York Top 100. Here on this tidewater fishery known as the Hudson River, anglers must be able to adjust. Tidal movements influence the bass. Weather changes can also alter your daily game plan, as Chet Dothett, a Lake Okeechobee, Florida-based pro, knows.
Today's been a slow day for me so far. I've just had one bite and lost him about a 2-pounder. Things have kind of changed since yesterday. Yesterday was kind of a partly cloudy to a lightly cloudy day. And out here over these water chestnuts, there was a lot of little bullfrogs. And you'd see them, you'd throw your bait out there, and you'd see them jumping around, and the fish occasionally come up and get one. And that's what I was doing yesterday. I caught 3 of my fish, throwing out there either a crawdad or a worm, and just dragging it across the top of the grass like a little frog would be hopping on it. And the fish would come up through the chestnuts and eat it. And today, with this real dark, cloudy day, I have not seen a frog out on this grass. It must take the sun to bring these frogs out and get them up on top of the grass. And so far, they haven't been feeding out here like that.
After the first day of competition, Chet ranked 3rd with a 5 bass limit of 12 pounds, 13 ounces. But it was Missouri pro Denny Brower who jumped out front with a total bag of 13 pounds, 5 ounces. Brower and Dothett are fishing this second day in the same general area, 60 miles south of Catskill near Newburgh in Wappinger Creek.
Well, the one thing about the tidal water is you've got to be in the right place at the right time. I was almost in the right place at the right time right there. We'll continue this conversation later, okay? I'm going to catch a fish. Now, the importance of the tide is these fish really feed on certain tides, and you can fish through an area and not think there's any fish there, and some other guy can come in at the right tide and absolutely clean up. And I think that's what's happened in this here area. A lot of guys fish through it in practice, and maybe the tides weren't quite right and they didn't get bit. I was fortunate and had a bite or two, and it brought me back, and therefore I pretty well have the area to myself. But they sure are tough to get the bite, and our tides aren't really right this week. It's ideal if we could really play that low tide, a couple hours on each side of it, and we're not going to get that. We basically are dealing with high tides during the tournament in this area I'm fishing.
Back in the chestnuts, Chet Dothett is finally connected. With a high tide here in Wappinger Creek, fishing has been a grind. Chet worked this same area for 30 minutes before this bass finally hit.
Oh, it's about time. That fish right there, I pitched that worm in there, and when it fell through the mat, that's when he grabbed it. He was laying just right underneath the top of the mat. I can see right now the tide is just starting to move out, so hopefully maybe this is going to turn the switch on for them and they'll get to biting.
Wappinger Creek has a good concentration of bass. Chet Dothett's working a 100-yard stretch of matted chestnuts and milfoil grass near the tributary's mouth. A quarter-mile up the creek, tournament trail roommates Danny Correa of Massachusetts and Randy Blockett of Missouri are trying to figure out the best bass-catching technique.
The fish on the outgoing tide tend to move off the bank and they'll hold between where I just casted and about to the edge of the grass here. But on this high tide, I mean, they're way back there, and you just have to keep throwing until you find one that's maybe halfway back here, just cruising along, like that one there. And what I'll do now is, I've at least found one, so now I'm gonna make 4 or 5 casts till I catch him. Try to draw him a little bit closer each time, not throwing into the pocket, just to the edges. This is all you do. You just keep trying for them until one of them either eats it or you can get them close enough where you can flip a Guido bug. That's what I've been throwing on them, and a worm. But I continually throw in the same little path here, because a lot of times what the fish will do is he'll hit the first time right there, and he'll track my spoon for another 20 or 30 feet, and then every time he gets a little bit closer to the boat till I can finally just drop my worm in on him and catch him.
The lure Chet Dothett is flipping is a 4-inch ringworm, the June bug color with a clear blue tail that adds flash. He's rigging it Texas style, weedless, with a 3/0 hook, and using a 5/16-ounce bullet-shaped sinker that's pegged to the worm with a screw-type lock. As a noisemaker, Chet inserts a glass bead with a small shot that makes a rattle. In the thick cover, the rattle may help. Chet works the lure in short jerks and hops. Randy Blockett is trying a different lure technique.
These fish are suspended underneath the chestnuts there, and we've been taking like spoons and stuff running across the surface, and they'll come up and blow up on it and miss it. You know, I've had like 20 to 30 strikes a day and only caught 2 fish yesterday. But today, the technique that I use, I was trying to figure out how to catch the fish once they hit. So instead of going with the spoon, I switched to this Lucky Strike Biffle's Mega Craw with a 1-ounce sinker on it. And what I'm doing, I'm casting it way over the chestnuts, reeling it real fast and dropping it down in the middle of the chestnuts, way back in them. And the same fish that are positioned way back in those chestnuts that were just blowing up on the spoon that are actually eating this Mega Craw.
The tide in Wappinger Creek is going out, creating the feeding activity Chet Dothett's been patiently waiting for. This bass hit Chet's June bug ringworm near the edge of the matted grass. Now the challenge is getting him out. Chet's persistence is paying off, and with a 60-mile boat ride back to the weigh-in at the village of Catskill, Dothett's definitely in striking distance of the lead. At the midway point in the New York Top 100, the Day 2 standings put Chet Dothett on top with 21 pounds 7 ounces, just 5 ounces ahead of Danny Correa in second place. Dan Moorhead and Mark Menendez, both Paducah, Kentucky-based pros, rank 3rd and 4th, followed by Tidal River veteran Randall Romig in 5th. Former Angler of the Year Gary Klein is 6th, ahead of Jim Bitter, the recent Minnesota Top 100 winner. In 8th, Kevin Van Dam, the New York Invitational champion at the Thousand Islands. Jeff Fletcher of Arkansas and Georgia's Stanley Mitchell are within 2 pounds and change of the lead. We've got us a horse race. Any bets on the winner? True to the legend of Rip Van Winkle, snooze and you lose in a BASS Top 100 tournament. In a 4-day competition like the New York Top 100 on the Hudson River, adjustment is key to a winning game plan. Jim Bitter, like the fictitious Rip, woke up, and it's a wake-up call that has everyone's attention at the Day 3 weigh-in.
Look at this, folks. 16 pounds, 3 ounces. Hold up a couple of fish, would you? Man. Jim won the Top 100 tournament at Minnesota earlier. Blew them all away, and he's threatened to do it here again. We followed you the first morning. You looked like you were just on a little fish pattern, just going through a bunch of little fish. And today, one of the best strings of the tournament, not the biggest string.
Well, I wanted to start out catching some small fish and catch them fast. I had this other little place, but I thought somebody'd be on it anyway because I got not a real good draw the first day, so I went for those little fish, and they didn't pan out. I went down here late to the spot I'm at now, and I caught a couple and run out of time. And then yesterday, I again tried to catch a small limit quick, and it didn't work out, so I went back into the same spot, and I caught a real good limit. And today, I just decided to forego the little limit and go after the big ones, and I just sat in there all day and did real well.
That's an understatement. But Jim Bitter's well on his way to winning another $45,000. He jumps from 7th place into the lead with 35 pounds, 14 ounces. Jeff Fletcher in second is 2 pounds, 3 ounces behind with 33 pounds, 11 ounces. Danny Correa, Randy Blockett, and Randall Romig round out the Day 3 leaderboard.
Jim Bitter is fishing in a boat basin area. This is actually a boat storage basin. It's a pocket just off of Wappingers Creek, about 300 yards from the Hudson River channel. It's the Wappingers Powerboat Association here. He says it's the only spot he has, and he's planning on staying here all day. However, conditions today are completely different than yesterday. By this time yesterday, it's about 8:30 in the morning now. Jim Bitter had his limit already. This morning, it's about 15 degrees cooler than it was yesterday morning. Cold front has moved through. Yesterday it was cloudy, threatening rain. Today it's partly cloudy. The skies are expected to clear through the day. The wind is up around 15 miles an hour, and the tide is 1 hour later going out this morning. So while Jim Bitter doesn't feel that the tide is affecting his fish that much, conditions are completely different.
There's just a little hump in here. It's about 2 foot high, ridge down through the middle there. And it's got milfoil on it. Most of it, high tide, is about 9, 11 foot deep, and the fish are like up on, right on the edge of that milfoil, just like Minnetonka.
Jim Bitter's lure selection and approach to fishing grass includes 3 basic baits: a Carolina rigged lizard, Riverside's Bigfoot, a 2/0 hook, a 1/2 ounce sliding sinker on 20-pound monofilament with a 2.5 foot leader of 12-pound test, the 1 ounce Strike King Pro Model spinnerbait, a heavy tandem-bladed lure, but the size is needed for bottom bumping. And a crankbait. The Rebel Deep We Are on retrieve has a wide wobble.
Well, that's what I've been doing. I just get tired of throwing one thing. It's not producing. I kind of make a circle of this little flat and with one bait, and then I pick up another bait and go around.
One thing you'll notice very quickly in watching professional tournament anglers is their persistence. Jim Bitter has stayed in this Wappingers Powerboat Association basin all day. He's been back and forth across a very small area. In fact, he's had one key spot in this area that has produced most of his fish. And yet all day he's been back and forth, rotating between Carolina rigged lizard, crankbait, and a spinnerbait, putting one down, picking another one up just to make a change, trying to get the fish to hit.
Sure.
Persistence is one of the keys in successful tournament angling.
I'm fishing a Carolina rig in this milfoil, and in order to make it come through a little bit easier, I scale down on the sinker size. I'm using a 1/2 ounce, and basically I'm just fishing the perimeter of it where it's real thin, and just working it real slow, and sometimes it rides up on the stems and falls back down. And it's real effective for vegetation like this, especially around the perimeter where it's thinner. These fish seem to be glued to the bottom, and if that bait comes up off the bottom, you just don't get bit. So while you're retrieving the lure, if you think it's leaving the bottom too far, just stop it and leave it drop back to the bottom and then continue to retrieve again. That's a key to fishing any kind of vegetation, is not to hang your lure up on it, because that tends to spook the fish. You just want it to move through it and just kind of bounce off of it a little bit.
At 53, one of the senior members of the BASS Tournament Trail, Jim Bitter may work a bit slower and more methodically, but his approach wins tournaments. The final standings: a winning weight of 43 pounds 11 ounces and back-to-back top 100 wins for Jim Bitter. Another old pro, Randall Romig, ranks second with 38 pounds 9 ounces, followed by Randy Blockett, Denny Brower, and Mark Harden, the 1995 Classic runner-up in 5th place. Other top finishers include Jeff Fletcher in 6th, Kevin Van Dam, Danny Correa, Doug Garrett, and Chet Dawson. In the amateur division, Al Gagliarducci, a Massachusetts Bassmaster, wins the $20,000 Ranger Bass Rig, despite not weighing a 12-inch keeper bass in the final round. Right now, it's time for the Pros Pointer, the how-to section of the Bassmasters. Brought to you by Wrangler Rugged Wear, geared for the outdoors.
I try to make a pretty long cast when I'm Carolina rigging, because I want to keep it on the bottom, and the further you are away from that lure, the easier it is to keep it down on the bottom. If you're real close, you're tending to pull it up off the bottom all the time. And I think the main thrust of the Carolina rig is that weight is dragging on the bottom and causing some commotion. The fish see the lizard falling behind, and that attracts them. And as you take up the slack, keep your line tight, because a lot of times those fish just suck that lizard in real softly, and you really have a hard time detecting it. So just drag it along until you either feel him bump it and set the hook immediately, or if you feel that dead weight on there, set the hook immediately. But the prime thing is to drag that sinker on the bottom all the time, and don't make it hop off the bottom. That's not the technique you use in Carolina rigging.
Well, that's the story of legendary Jim Bitter's New York Top 100 victory. Old pros don't grow old. In bass fishing, it's called experience. Next week, our Bassmasters cameras follow the tournament trail to Pine Bluff, Arkansas for an important Bassmasters Central Division Invitational. The pros tackle the Arkansas River. Hope you'll join us for more tips and tactics. For the Bassmasters, I'm Bob Cobb. We'll see you all next week.
The Bassmasters has been brought to you by Chevy Trucks, the most dependable, longest-lasting trucks on the road. Kelly Tires, where you get a good deal on a great tire. Jersey's Activewear, the official licensed knit apparel of the Bass Angler Sportsman's Society. Catch all the action of the World Championship Bassmasters Classic September 27th and 28th, 1997. A special one-hour airing of the Bassmasters right here on TNN Outdoors.